I've often felt it. I've sat there and I have felt the knife slipped firmly in between my shoulder blades and tried to have it shoved through the other side through my heart.
So what is happening in Hollywood? Nobody knows. The worst thing to call somebody is crazy, is dismissive.
Imagine one of the most beloved and powerful figures in entertainment, Oprah Winfrey, being connected to a deep, dark conspiracy that stretches across Hollywood, involving some of the most chilling allegations you could possibly think of. Shocking, right? Well, that's exactly what's being suggested by none other than Mel Gibson, a man who's no stranger to controversy himself. But this time, Gibson isn't just making headlines for his past scandals. He's blowing the whistle on something far bigger. He's pointing fingers at Hollywood elites, accusing them of being involved in horrifying secret dealings. And at the center of it all, Oprah.
We're monitoring another push to free Sean Diddy Combs tonight, with his legal team citing new evidence in an updated bail proposal. The music mogul agreeing to around-the-clock security and cutting out contact with basically anyone but his legal team to get out of jail ahead of his trial scheduled for May of next year for charges he allegedly coerced and abused women for years.
Now, before your mind starts racing, let's take a moment to really unpack what's going on here. Mel Gibson, the man who brought us films like Braveheart and The Passion of the Christ, is now turning his attention to exposing something far more sinister than any on-screen villain, a secretive, corrupt system lurking behind the glitz and glamour of Tinseltown. And believe it or not, he's linking Oprah Winfrey, one of the most influential women in the world, to these alleged dark dealings.
We have always said it is about the children. It's not just about me. Never just made it about me. I'm just the loudest one.
So, how did we get here? How did Oprah, the queen of daytime television, go from being a symbol of empowerment and philanthropy to being accused of having some sort of involvement in a hidden agenda that's been whispered about in Hollywood shadows for years? Well, Mel Gibson isn't just making casual accusations. He's got some serious claims that, if true, could shake the very foundation of Hollywood. It all started with Gibson's involvement in the film Sound of Freedom, a movie that's been causing quite a stir since its release. This low-budget thriller, starring Jim Caviezel, follows a federal agent's mission to take down a trafficking ring in Colombia, and it doesn't pull any punches. The film's plot is intense, and it shines a light on the kind of horrific realities that most people would rather pretend don't exist. But this isn't just any movie. Gibson has been vocal about how this story ties into a much larger issue, one that he claims is being ignored, or worse, covered up, by the powers that be in Hollywood.
Like this, documentaries like this, shows like this, there's a lot of people that don't want to do it because where are you going to platform it? Where are you going to put it up? But if there's a guy that could do it and pull it off, it's definitely Mel Gibson.
Gibson's involvement in Sound of Freedom isn't just about making a film. It's about raising awareness about the types of exploitation that go on behind closed doors. And according to him, there's a reason why this film almost didn't see the light of day. You see, Sound of Freedom didn't have the backing of any major studio when it was first made. In fact, it faced roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, with Disney, of all companies, initially holding the rights to the film and doing nothing with them. It wasn't until the filmmakers managed to buy back the rights and partner with Angel Studios that the movie was finally released. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Gibson claims that the pushback against Sound of Freedom wasn't accidental. He believes that certain people in Hollywood didn't want this film to come out because it exposes a truth that they'd rather keep hidden. And who are these people? Well, according to Gibson, they include some of the most powerful figures in the industry. He's hinted that there are elites in Hollywood who are not only aware of the kinds of trafficking that the film depicts, but are actually involved in it.
It sounds like there was probably a lot of hidden cameras as well. Is that what is being talked about?
Yes, this was actually in his Atlanta home, at a home he had in Atlanta at one point. And it does seem that the person isn't like looking into the video, so it's, to me, doesn't seem like that person knows they're being videotaped. It doesn't seem like they're active participant in the videotaping.
Now, if you're thinking this sounds like a wild conspiracy theory, you're not alone. But the thing is, Gibson has never been one to shy away from making bold claims. And let's not forget, this isn't the first time he's spoken out about the darker side of Hollywood. In fact, back in the late 90s, Gibson gave an interview where he described Hollywood as a place where some of his worst nightmares had come true. He talked about how he'd had weird, paranoid suspicions when he first arrived in Hollywood, only to later realize that those suspicions weren't so paranoid after all. In that same interview, Gibson described a time when he met someone who gave him a deeply unsettling feeling. He didn't name names at the time, but he made it clear that this person was a big deal in Hollywood, someone with a cold, almost demonic presence. And while he played it off as a joke, referring to this person as the Antichrist, you can't help but wonder if there was more truth to that statement than he let on. Was he trying to warn us about something even back then?
The first time I really came over here, I had a whole bunch of weird paranoid suspicions. about what the hell was going on, because there was a lot of stuff I couldn't understand.
Right.
And nobody was really bothering to explain it to me.
They don't.
And and I formed a bunch of opinions about the town.
Fast forward to today, and Gibson's claims have only gotten more intense. He's no longer just hinting at the presence of bad actors in Hollywood. He's outright accusing people of being part of a hidden network of exploitation. And one of the names that's been caught up in the storm is Oprah Winfrey. Yes, the same Oprah who's known for giving away cars on her show, running a successful media empire, and donating millions to charity. According to Gibson, there's more to Oprah than meets the eye. But why Oprah? What could she possibly have to do with this alleged conspiracy? Well, it all comes down to her connections. You see, Oprah has long been a close friend of some of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry, including seeing Diddy comes. Diddy has been embroiled in his own controversies over the years, with allegations of misconduct and exploitation swirling around him for decades. And now, with recent lawsuits accusing him of even more serious offenses, those connections are being scrutinized like never before.
You know, it's still pretty early in the proceedings. I think it's only been about a month or a month and a half since he's been arraigned and held in detention. And so the investigations are always going to be a continuous and ongoing process. I'm sure at this point there's been an exchange of discovery. And not only that, but I think there's been a gag order placed on the attorneys with information that they can and cannot share. But more importantly,
Gibson seems to believe that Oprah's relationship with Diddy, along with her ties to other Hollywood elites, could point to her being involved in, or at the very least, turning a blind eye to, the kind of exploitation that Sound of Freedom is trying to expose. Could it be that Oprah, who has always positioned herself as a champion for the underdog, is actually complicit in the very thing she claims to fight against? It's a shocking thought, to say the least. But when you start to look at some of the controversies Oprah has been involved in over the years, it doesn't seem quite as far-fetched. Take her long-standing feud with rapper 50 Cent, for example. 50 Cent has been vocal about how he believes Oprah has unfairly targeted black men in her criticisms of hip-hop, while ignoring or even defending powerful white men who have been accused of serious misconduct. And then there's her falling out with comedian Monique, who has accused Oprah of sabotaging her career and failing to support her when she was being blacklisted in Hollywood.
Y'all spoke after this.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't have anything against Oprah.
You just called the bitch.
I'm gonna tell you why.
You named your dog Oprah, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
These feuds might seem like nothing more than personal disagreements, but when you start to connect the dots, a pattern begins to emerge. Is it possible that Oprah has been using her influence not just to build her empire, but to protect certain people in Hollywood from facing the consequences of their actions? Could her public persona as a benevolent media mogul be hiding something far more sinister? Let's not forget that Oprah has also been connected to other controversial figures, like John of God, the Brazilian healer who was once featured on her show and later convicted of horrific crimes. While Oprah distanced herself from him after the allegations surfaced, some have questioned how much she knew about his behavior and why she chose to feature him on her show in the first place.
You have a couple of pets as well,
Yeah.
a dog and a cat with interesting names, to say the least.
Yeah. That's Oprah.
That's Oprah. Okay.
And then there's the resurfaced claims from musician Seal, who accused Oprah of knowing about Harvey Weinstein's misconduct for years and doing nothing about it. Weinstein, of course, was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood before his downfall, and his close ties to Oprah have led some to wonder whether she was aware of his actions long before they became public. All of this paints a picture of Oprah as someone who is deeply embedded in Hollywood's power structure and perhaps willing to look the other way when it benefits her. Could that same willingness to ignore wrongdoing extend to the kinds of exploitation that Gibson is accusing Hollywood elites of being involved in?
Tell her.
I would say, Oprah Winfrey, you know what you need to do. And stop hiding behind what you call was negative comments.
It's a disturbing thought, but one that's hard to ignore given the mounting evidence. And while Oprah has yet to respond to these latest claims for Gibson, the fact that her name is even being mentioned in connection with such serious allegations is enough to make anyone stop and think. As we dive deeper into this web of intrigue, one thing is clear. The more you dig into Hollywood's underbelly, the more you start to see just how interconnected everything is. From the stars we idolize to the moguls who run the studios, it seems like everyone is connected in some way to the darker side of the entertainment industry. And if someone as seemingly untouchable as Oprah can be caught up in these allegations, it begs the question, who else is involved?
Please give me what I say. I'm not trying to hurt you. I will never try to hurt you.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Mel Gibson's claims, as shocking as they are still just that, claims, while there's no concrete proof linking Oprah to the kinds of activities that Sound of Freedom exposes. The fact that these allegations are even being made is enough to raise eyebrows. After all, Hollywood has a long history of covering up scandals and protecting its own, and it wouldn't be the first time that a beloved public figure has been revealed to have a darker side. That being said, it's important to approach the accusations with a healthy dose of skepticism. While Gibson's claims are certainly attention-grabbing, they also play into a larger narrative that's been gaining traction in recent years, one that suggests Hollywood is full of secret cabals and hidden agendas. This narrative, often associated with groups like Kanan, has been widely discredited, but that hasn't stopped it from gaining a significant following. Could Gibson's claims be feeding into the same narrative, or is there actually something more to them?
Bullies in this business. And the bullies are so used to being bullies, they don't understand when somebody bite back.
Right.
Not bark back, they bite back.
Right.
It's hard to say for sure, but one thing is certain. The conversation around Sound of Freedom and the allegations it raises isn't going away anytime soon. Whether you believe Gibson's claims or not, the fact that a movie about trafficking has sparked such a heated debate is proof that this is an issue that strikes a nerve with a lot of people. And as more and more stories about Hollywood's dark side come to light, it's only a matter of time before we start to see some real changes, or at the very least, some more uncomfortable truths being exposed. As we move forward, it's worth keeping an eye on how this all plays out. Will Oprah address the allegations being thrown her way, or will she remain silent? And what about the other Hollywood elites that Gibson has hinted at? Will they face similar scrutiny, or will they continue to operate in the shadows? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, Hollywood's days of hiding behind its glamorous facade may be numbered.
Is everybody familiar with the old Houdini? So what Diddy's lawyers are trying to do is pull a Houdini. They're trying to say that the evidence that they have is different. Well, it's not different. The video that the entire world has seen is not going to go away. The fact that he had parties that were freak-offs is not going away. So it's just a question of whether or not Diddy is able to make bond.
And that brings us to another key player in this unfolding saga, Cian Diddy Combs. His name has come up time and time again in connection with some of the most troubling allegations in the industry, and his relationship with Oprah is just one of the many threads that ties him to this larger web of scandal. But before we dive deeper into Diddy's current scandals, let's take a closer look at Oprah's past feuds and controversies. You see, this isn't the first time she's found herself at the center of some serious drama. For someone who's built a brand on being warm, caring, and enlightened, Oprah has had more than her fair share of public spats, especially with people who don't fit neatly into her narrative. And when you start to peel back the layers, you'll see there's a pattern here. People who go against Oprah often find themselves in tough spots. It makes you wonder how much of this is coincidence and how much of it is Oprah using her influence to control the narrative.
Every time she made a mention to hip-hop culture, it was something that was wrong with it. And it was something that was on my CD that was the largest debut in hip-hop.
Take her infamous feud with 50 Cent, for example. Now, you might recall that 50 Cent, the rapper, known for his no-holds-barred attitude, had a long-standing beef with Oprah Winfrey. It all started when Oprah publicly criticized hip-hop, calling out the genre for being misogynistic and violent. And guess who was right in her crosshairs? That's right, 50 Cent. At the time, Oprah had made it clear that she wasn't a fan of his music, and for 50, that was a big deal. Being on Oprah's show was a major status symbol, a sign that you'd made it. So when Oprah made it clear that she wasn't interested in having him as a guest, 50 decided to take matters into his own hands. In a 2020 interview with The Guardian, 50 Cent admitted that he decided to turn Oprah into his enemy after realizing they'd never be friends. She was completely against everything that was in my music, he said. So she ain't never going to have me on that show. I'm never going to reach that platform, which is confirmation of you being a huge success. So I just said, okay, if we can't be friends, then at least let's be enemies. And here's where things get interesting. Instead of backing down, 50 Cent leaned into the feud, even going so far as to name his pet dog Oprah. Yeah, you heard that right. He named his dog after her. It was classic 50, always ready to troll anyone who crossed him. But underneath the humor, there was a real power struggle at play. 50 Cent felt that Oprah was using her platform to dismiss and belittle an entire culture, and he wasn't going to let her get away with it.
Oprah Winfrey called us up, and she said my brother wanted to come on the show.
But what makes this feud even more fascinating is how it eventually ended. As much as 50 Cent loved to poke fun at Oprah, the two eventually buried the hatchet, thanks to none other than Oprah's best friend, Gayle King. According to 50, it was Gayle who convinced Oprah to finally sit down with him and hear his side of the story. And once they did, something unexpected happened. They actually found common ground. In his book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, 50 Cent explained that when Oprah finally met him, she realized that the 50 Cent persona she'd been so critical of wasn't the real him. He wasn't just some drama-loving rapper who couldn't help but get into beefs. He was strategic, and every move he made was calculated. If you hate me, you're more likely to talk about me, he said. If you feel passionately about me in a negative way, at some point you'll probably say to your friend, man, I can't stand 50 Cent. Your friend is going to ask you why. And just like that, I've become the subject of a conversation. That's all I'm asking for. Now, I've got a foot in the door. So in the end, 50 Cent didn't just settle his beef with Oprah. He actually gained her respect. And for Oprah, it was a rare moment where she had to admit that maybe she'd been wrong about someone. But it also showed just how powerful she is. Even someone as outspoken as 50 Cent had to play the game and find a way to get on her good side.
And then we said, but did you pay her fairly? And then he said, I paid her more than she's ever made.
Now, let's talk about another feud that's been making waves for years. Oprah's falling out with Monique. If you've been following the headlines, you'll know that this one is a lot more personal and a lot more painful. Monique has been open about how deeply Oprah's actions hurt her, and she hasn't been shy about calling out the media mogul publicly. It all started back in 2010 when Monique won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for her role in Precious. It should have been a career-defining moment, but instead, it marked the beginning of her downward spiral in Hollywood. According to Monique, her refusal to play the game during the Precious press tour, meaning her unwillingness to do unpaid promotional work, led to her being blackballed. And she claims that Oprah, along with director Lee Daniels and producer Tyler Perry, were the ones who orchestrated it.
I said, I don't want nothing to do with that cat. I said, I know is up to us.
But the real betrayal, according to Monique, came when Oprah invited her family onto her show. In a 2023 interview with Shannon Sharpe on his Club Shay Shay podcast, Monique explained that Oprah had reached out to her asking if it was okay to have her brother Gerald Eames on the show. Now, for context, Monique had been very vocal about the fact that Gerald had abused her when she was younger. So when Oprah told her that Gerald wanted to come on the show to apologize and raise awareness about predators, Monique gave her blessing with one important condition. She didn't want to be involved in any way. I didn't want anything to do with him, Monique said. But if you feel he needs to apologize, let him do that. What Monique didn't expect, though, was that Oprah would also invite her parents onto the show, something Monique says Oprah never mentioned. When she saw the commercials for the episode, she was blindsided. And for Monique, that felt like the ultimate betrayal. You betrayed me, sister, she said. We never talked about my mother being there. Monique's feud with Oprah isn't just about professional jealousy or a bruised ego. It's about trust and betrayal on a deeply personal level. Monique has made it clear that she feels Oprah used her family's trauma for ratings without ever considering how it would affect her. And even now, years later, Monique hasn't let it go. In fact, she's brought it up again and again in interviews, making sure that Oprah knows just how much she hurt her.
Now I begin to see commercials with my brother, my mother, my father, and my other brother.
But here's the thing. While Monique has been vocal about her pain, Oprah has remained mostly silent. She hasn't publicly addressed Monique's claims, and that silence speaks volumes. It's almost as if Oprah believes she's above it all, that she doesn't need to explain herself. And maybe that's true. After all, Oprah has built an empire on her ability to connect with people and make them feel seen. But for Monique, that connection feels like a lie, a mask that Oprah wears to hide her true nature. And this brings us back to the idea of Oprah as someone who isn't quite what she seems. On the surface, she's a champion for the underdog, a woman who's used her platform to uplift others. But when you look a little closer, you start to see the cracks. Whether it's her feud with 50 Cent or her falling out with Monique, there's a pattern of Oprah using her influence to control the narrative. And those who go against her often find themselves on the losing end.
Let that be a lesson to all the bullies, may it be in comedy, may it be in wherever. You never know who you step into.
And that brings us to one of the most shocking allegations against Oprah, her connection to Diddy Combs. Now, Diddy's name has been in the headlines a lot recently, and not for good reasons. He's been hit with a wave of lawsuits, all claiming that he's been involved in some seriously shady activities. From coercion to violence, the allegations against Diddy paint a picture of a man who's willing to do whatever it takes to protect his empire. And guess who's been one of his biggest supporters over the years? That's right, Oprah. Now, it's important to note that there's no concrete proof linking Oprah to any of Diddy's alleged activities. But the fact that they've been so closely connected for so long raises some serious question. Why is Oprah so willing to stand by Diddy, even as these disturbing allegations come to light? Is it possible that she knows more than she's letting on? Or could it be that, like so many others in Hollywood, she's willing to look the other way as long as it benefits her?
Yeah, I mean, that fact in of itself is a big deal, because when you're talking about going back in time and talking about these allegations from other alleged victims, there's not a lot of police reports, but you guys actually have one. And is that going to be revealed? Are we going to be able to see it?
Yes, as soon as I file my lawsuit in civil court, I will be attaching the criminal complaint.
Let's not forget that Oprah has a history of defending controversial figures. Remember John of God, the Brazilian healer who was once featured on her show? Back in 2010, Oprah called him a miracle worker and praised his ability to heal people. But in 2018, John of God was arrested and charged with some of the most horrific crimes imaginable. And while Oprah quickly distanced herself from him after the news broke, it still raises the question of how much she knew. Was she really blindsided by the allegations, or had she turned a blind eye, just like so many others? And then there's the Time Seal. The British musician accused Oprah of knowing about Harvey Weinstein's behavior long before it became public. In an Instagram post that went viral, Seal didn't hold back. He shared a meme of Oprah and Weinstein together with the caption, "When you've been part of the problem for decades, but suddenly they all think you are the solution." Seal's post echoed a sentiment that many people were starting to feel, that Oprah, despite her public image, had been complicit in Hollywood's culture of silence.
If he does this new, quote, robust bail package, you can avoid and evade. And he is very connected with people that can help him avoid and evade. I'm not saying he will, but I would be surprised if the court grants him a bond. When the federal government wants you detained, you are normally detained. And here it was a very far-reaching situation that he was involved in.
So when you look at Oprah's relationship with Diddy, it's hard not to wonder if there's more going on behind the scenes. Diddy has been accused of some serious misconduct, and yet Oprah has remained by his side, even as the allegations pile up. Is it possible that Oprah, like so many other powerful figures in Hollywood, is more concerned with protecting her own interests than with holding people accountable? The allegations against Diddy are disturbing, to say the least. From lawsuits accusing him of coercion to claims that he's been involved in illegal activities for years, the picture being painted isn't a pretty one. And yet, despite all of this, Oprah has continued to maintain her relationship with him. Could it be that Diddy, like so many others in Hollywood, knows things that Oprah would rather keep buried? Or is she simply willing to overlook his actions because of their long-standing friendship?
So it was my obligation to let Oprah Winfrey know how I really felt.
One thing's for sure, the more you dig into Oprah's connections, the more questions you start to have. From her feuds with celebrities like 50 Cent and Monique to her relationship with controversial figures like Diddy and John of God, there's a pattern here. A pattern of Oprah using her influence to shape the narrative, to protect those who benefit her, and to silence those who dare to challenge her. As we continue to unravel these threads, it's becoming clear that Oprah's public image as a benevolent media mogul might not tell the whole story. Behind the scenes, she's connected to some of Hollywood's most powerful and most controversial figures. And while she's managed to avoid direct scrutiny for most of her career, the tide is starting to turn. People are beginning to ask the tough questions, and Oprah's silence is becoming harder to ignore.
It was completely outside of my frame of reference. I've been in show business since I was 14. And I've heard the stories of what happened.
So after all this, we're left with some huge questions. Do you think Oprah has genuinely been unaware of these disturbing connections? Or could her silence hint at a deeper involvement in Hollywood's darker side? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you believe she's just a friend who stood by powerful people, or do you think there's more to her story? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to stay updated on Hollywood's latest secrets and controversies. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.